Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
So I was thinking about, the current state of the iPad this week, funny enough, because, using the M1's been like such a pleasure, and been seeing a bit of commentary around where does the iPad fit in these days, particularly like if you think about how expensive the iPad Pro is, and that's meant to be, geared towards severe, should I call it that, serious productivity or whatever. And I actually found in my use case that because the M1's such a pleasure to use these days, that where is the iPad fitting in? I'm not wanting to reach for it as much, aside from maybe doing some reading or basic browsing and stuff like that, which seems like a bit of a waste for if you're using an iPad Pro in my case. And I just wonder overall what's going to happen over the next little while, because I guess the Mac came roaring back in such a big way with the M1 after languishing, for such a long time. And is there now going to be a redirection to figure out how to boost the iPad and its its place in the lineup? And it would seem to me that it's really not about the hardware; it's about iPad OS and how they use the software, because the scuttlebutt this year and the feedback after 15 was released was like, really, that's the best you can do? That you got nothing to give us? And I think there's something to that. I mean, like, why is it that the A12X chip from 3 years ago is still not being pushed enough by the software, and why isn't Final Cut on the iPad, like, for instance, or any of the others, DaVinci or whatever, take your productivity tool? I get that there's probably some cannibalization there, but it just says to me like Apple probably needs to step up their game on the iPad front.
Oh, look, definitely. And I can even add to this now from a different perspective. In recent months, I've got myself an iPhone 13 and an M1 MacBook. And to be honest, the iPhone 13 for me is basically an iPad. Yeah. I've got the M1, which is a clamshell iPad, and I've got a small screen iPhone 13 iPad. So I really don't know where the iPad sits in anymore. I absolutely love the M1. It's a pleasure to sit with. It's not a lap warmer like a lot of those PC laptops. It just sits there. It does its thing. It's a great piece of machinery, and I can use it for pro applications, and I can use it for leisure applications, no problems. I can even use it for work.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that the iPad isn't a fantastic machine. It's just it's still the device that is a nice to have as opposed to must have, which I don't think they've actually centrally resolved that issue ever since they released the original one back in whenever it was, 2010. And we've been arguing about this for years now.
Well, we have, but it's interesting because it's flipped, because I think we were having this discussion about the MacBooks, 3 years ago when the iPad Pro sort of was at its peak, and like the MacBooks had the Intel chips and weren't performing, and the question is, why do I need a MacBook now? Now it's gone the other way. I need my MacBook. Not so sure about the iPad.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I am kind of looking forward to see if they actually do push the platform a bit more next year at least. And Apple's historically quite slow at bringing some of this stuff out. They like to, push things along for years at a time before they actually pull the trigger on something. With the M1 being a classic example of it, effectively, the last good MacBook before that was probably from 2015. So that's a long time between drinks, shall we say. Alrighty. I like this story. Bill Gates investing in nuclear fusion, and it's totally in line with him and his interests, I would have thought, for green sustainable energy and all that sort of thing. The thing that kind of sort of jumped out at me was why it's not being pushed more, at least in terms of being looked at as an option. Obviously the term nuclear generates controversy because of, I guess the history of it and the sort of waste products. If it goes wrong, it can go really wrong, at least with the traditional sort of technology that has been employed. So it's just, that was the thing that kind of struck me. I don't know if you thought that in terms of this particular technology.
Well, I always wonder with these things. I mean, it's, also part of a marketing campaign, isn't it? Bill Gates is on board, so, any other investors want to come and put money into this money pit. Look, in all seriousness, fusion reactors, if and when we get there, will revolutionise energy and power in this world. So, but it's challenging. I mean, the only fusion that we see naturally occurring happens in the sun or the stars around us. So to recreate that inside something made out of earth-bound metals, a plasma that hot, and they have to get to, I think, around 1 million degrees or something like that, because we don't have the gravitational force, obviously. So they need to go with the temperatures. My goodness, that is a huge engineering challenge. But they're confident. But of course, you would be if you want more investment. But having said that, whoever unlocks these secrets is a bit like quantum computing. Whoever gets there first will have an incredible advantage. And these are the sorts of technologies which we've only just really been able to tackle now. And if we do achieve these technologies with something, say, like fusion, well, then for the first time ever, we can probably say goodbye to coal and fossil fuels. Which,
of course, has been the topic of of recent focus in terms of how we get to 2050 and our emissions reduction targets and all that sort of thing. So who knows? When focus is put on things, sometimes it does actually end up happening. So which is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
This other topic here about Bitcoin, I had to laugh because. Still talking tech here, but now, cryptocurrency, where is it at? And I just find Bitcoin hilarious only because, it's kind of funny that it's, what is it, at 70 grand or something now, US dollars. And then it's like dipping and going up and down. It's like the ultimate speculation market or something like that. But it just, it's making it challenging to figure out how you can predict where it's going to go and where it's going to fit in terms of practical uses on a day-to-day basis. And there still seems to be this push to try and make it into something that can be used that way, but it still seems wonky in terms of practical use.
Well, this is the thing. Bitcoin's probably got marketing positioned on all the other cryptos. Bitcoin was never intended as a currency, and it was never, intended to do anything other than show that you could create a currency. And it's been adopted as a currency, so I guess it's got some value to some people. Some people willing to exchange, hard-earned dollars for something they can't see or touch. The other cryptos which are interesting, everything from Ethereum through to Cardamom and whatever else, Dogecoin or whatever they call it. Well, I don't know about that one, but some of the other ones actually have application outside of purely a currency, i.e. they can be linked as tokens to commodities of value. So we just don't know where this is going to go, I guess, more broadly. I expect probably Ethereum, which has been, set up and potentially regulated in a way that it can be incorporated into, say, the US economy seamlessly. There might be a future value for that, might be a huge future value for that. Bitcoin, well, they're predicted it'll be $200,000 a coin by the end of next year. They seem to be tracking all right along those, but there's no guarantee, at any point that Bitcoin won't be worth nothing tomorrow. So,
well, isn't that the key point when discussing, something like Bitcoin, that it's almost impossible to predict, yet everyone's wanting to try and predict? what's going to happen.
Well, I guess that's how people make money on these things, you know. So there's a lot of excitement, but by anyone's tech standards, Bitcoin's getting a bit old now. 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Time to move on to the next thing, people.
Well, that's why I like the other story around Charlie Munger lashing crypto, and I'll see if I can find the quote that was in here that he. I think the .com boom was crazier in terms of valuation than even what we have now. But overall, I consider this era even crazier than .com era. I'm never going to buy a cryptocurrency. I wish they'd never been invented. But I guess you'd expect that from a traditional investor anyway. Who, I mean, he sounds like he wants to. How was it? I think. I can't remember exactly where he said it, but it was something along the lines of he wants to invest things that actually probably produce and do good things as opposed to speculate or do bad things.
Well, since the GFC, even though that was meant to prevent all of these things from ever happening again, I think it's all been about speculation. Low interest rates, lots of free money, and then, you can only invest in so many Apple and Tesla shares before you have to invest in crypto, I guess. And, but I do like what Charlie Munger's referring to. I mean, you look at the price of AOL back in the day and the fact it was able to buy Time Warner, and, they were, talking about things as ridiculous as streaming high-definition video on 56K modems, on full screen. There was ridiculous talk, particularly around the internet back then, and as it turns out, everything they were promising during the .com era, which is more than 20 years ago now, finally has come true in 2020. So maybe if you're looking at crypto, there's another 10 years before crypto really, we can tell what value it has or what productive value it has. And, I think there's a lot of time for investment and investment strategies to change in that time too.
Well, when you consider, and I know I'm sort of drawing a long bow with this one, but just how money has been treated by, in terms of spending by governments, and the fact that it doesn't seem to matter how much debt and any of these big institutions or countries are in these days, they can just keep spending. And, a bit like how, the Reserve Bank can lend money to the government, but the government kind of owns the Reserve Bank, so they don't have to pay it back, technically speaking, and stuff like that. And then you wonder, well, maybe in a world like that where it could potentially, become meaningless, maybe crypto, that's when it steps into its own in the future.
Well, very true. Modern monetary theory, which is what you're talking about, where the reserve banks just give money to the government and the government owns the reserve bank, and then, under the carpet just eliminates the debt,
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Does it mean that we've been working for all the wrong reasons? Does that mean no one has to work anymore and no one has to be productive? Well, obviously the world would stop if that was the case, but what's the motivation going to be?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because for all the talk of crypto being out there and what is it really and all this sort of stuff, it kind of makes you then wonder about other things in the financial world in terms of what actually is real.
Yeah, it is. It's this might be why we're in for a correction because things, with COVID and what's happened over the last, 15 years post GFC, and, obviously we are in uncharted waters. And I guess if the governments can forgive their own debts, maybe that's a way out. But if not, at some point, it could all unravel, and that won't be pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, and I might just leave with a final note of circling back to our iPad topic. Just go out and buy some iPads with some Bitcoin, and there you go. Everything should be fine with the world, or something like that. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.